All right, so 5:22 a.m. There's no better time to make a YouTube video, especially one on Mbsr. So this is week 2 of the Pelosi Mindfulness Mbsr course. Now, this channel, if we look through the history of it, it's all been just deep, hard, technical stuff. I attempted the CCIE equivalent for Juniper on here for service provider. That's how the channel started. See, we've got CCNP content on here, AI content, so lots of stuff on here, good stuff, great stuff. But the thing is, what I'm trying to do now is kind of get my life to a better place. I believe that the first revolution, or the first wave of the AI resolution is personal growth. I think the AIs could have basically limitless potential for taking someone from a place where they're, struggling with health issues, they're struggling to make the progress they want in their career, they're struggling with relationships, to a place where like they're doing everything right. For me, I gained 100 pounds since the pandemic. It's because I was ordering out food. It's because I was choosing the wrong food types. I was doing it in the wrong amounts. So we're working on that. I've had my whole life. I've had problems keeping house. We're working on that too. So when I talk to ChatGPT, and we have those sorts of discussions, like what can I do to, here's my problems, I've got trials and tribulations, help me, bro. When I have those kinds of conversations with ChatGPT, time and time again, we always come back to the same thing. I got to get my levels of anxiety, stress, and depression better. And the best way to do that is to seek professional help for sure. But that's especially in the United States and the state of Texas, that's kind of a whole thing. What else can I do right here, right now, to address that? And the answer is MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's just meditating, basically. But it's that through a 8-week course online, completely free. And there's all kinds of resources. They have you read, they have you do the meditations, and there's even ways you can tap into other people doing it as well through Zoom calls they have. So last video we started week 2. We got the second formal practice out of the way. They want you to go hard. They want you to do 3 hours of meditation a week. They want you to do at least a half an hour a day, and to complete all the reading and stuff as well. And I'm nearly there. They want you to do it in a log, a practice log. So let's think about so let's think about getting those done. So that would mean I have to do the sitting meditation today and then the body scan tomorrow. So they want you to alternate between the two kinds of meditation. So I think I want to start out this video by getting that sitting meditation out of the way, and then afterwards we can read more. And try to get some reading done too. The other thing they want is an informal practice log where you think back to the day and you think of really pleasant events that happened. So I guess I do have one here. So the experience was I was working, and while the events, I would say yes, I was. And how did it feel? I felt in the flow. I felt like I felt in the flow, like I was getting enough done, like I was able to act effectively, which is a great feeling. The feeling that you're always up against the wall and you can't do it right and stuff is tough. But when you really hit that flow and you're enjoying, enjoyed coding. Every software developer can relate to that. It's really a wonderful feeling. So deep curiosity, of course, because you take the object that you're working with, you pull it apart, you see how it works, you see the properties it has, all of that. It's just interesting to see like what's inside an object, a Python object, when you're working. Feelings, a kind of relief was another feeling. Relief that I could actually implement my thoughts, and it wasn't the case that my thinking was flawed. Thinking or understanding of the technology was flawed. And then what do I notice? The fondness. I feel some more fondness, excitement to do for the work today. Yeah. So there you go. That's as simple as it's got to be. So they want you to do this every night. So they want you to have 7 entries of this. So we'll see how that goes. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's just about getting those improvements. So, when you get an A on a course, you can get like a 90% to 92% or so. So just want to get an A on the course. I don't have to do everything 100% perfect. All right, so now with that, it's time for the formal practice, which is the sitting meditation. So this is going to be long as heck. It's going to be 32 minutes, but so you can skip ahead or do it with me or whatever, and then I will come back and try to knock some reading off as well. So with that, I'll do the video version with closed captioning so that there's not as much dead air time, and I'll knock this off.
This segment guides you through a sitting meditation with breath as the primary object of awareness. Arranging to spend this time in a comfortable but attentive posture, preferably sitting up without leaning back for support if that's possible for you, and at a time and in a place where you won't be disturbed. Sitting in a dignified posture, head balanced on shoulders, arms and hands resting in a comfortable position. This is a time for allowing ourselves to switch from our normal mode of doing and moving and reacting to one of simply being, just being attentive to what is happening within your own awareness right here and right now. And as you sit, just noticing sensations of breath. Just noticing how your abdomen moves on each in-breath and out-breath. The movement of air through your nostrils. The slight movement of chest and shoulders. Just bringing awareness to whichever part of the breath cycle and wherever in your body it is most vivid, whether it be your tummy or your chest or your shoulders or the movement of air through your nostrils. Noticing the entire cycle of breath. From the movement of the air coming in and filling the lungs and extending the abdomen slightly. The movement of air going out. And being aware of the pause, the stopping point in between the in-breath and the out-breath and the out-breath and the next in-breath. It's all one movement. Even through the changing of direction, just noticing where that pause is. Seeing to what degree you can be aware of the whole entire cycle. recognizing that each part of the cycle is different than another part. And this time through may be different than the last time through, and each one is absolutely unique in its own way if you pay attention. You'll notice your attention from time to time shifting away from breath. The mind may wander into fantasies or memories, thoughts of the day, worries that you might have, things you need to do. And without giving yourself a hard time, when you notice that that's happened, just gently but firmly bring your awareness back to the sensations of breathing. The actual physical sensations of breath as it moves through your body. Being aware of where the mind goes. Gently shifting your awareness to sensations of breath. And noticing the tendency to want to control your breathing. Letting the quality of attention be light and easy. One of simply observing and noticing. Just as if you were on a float on a gently undulating sea, where you go up with one wave and down with the next. You don't control the duration of the waves or the depth between the waves. You're just riding. Just gently coming back to sensations of breathing. You may notice that there are sounds in addition to the sounds that come from this recording. Sounds of traffic or movement or something else going on. And just noticing that your attention is moved to that perception of sound. And staying with it just long enough to notice the quality of the sound. Sound is vibration, tone, volume or intensity. Being aware of the tendency of the mind to label sound as traffic, or as voices, or as music. And coming closer to the actual experience of the sound as it hits your eardrums. Qualities of pitch or rhythm or intensity. Separating out the actual reception of sound from the labels we put on it. And if you've been paying attention to sound or notice that you've gone off to be noticing the perceptions of sound, bringing your attention once again back to breath. Letting your breath be your anchor of awareness. So that each time your awareness goes somewhere else, just gently coming back to breath without judgment or any upset if you can do that. Just say, well, my attention's gone somewhere else, just coming back to breath. Noticing the tendency to have an opinion about things, about liking the way things are going right now, not liking it, finding it uncomfortable, That too can be an object of awareness, just noticing that you have an opinion about things often. So that's my liking mind, just liking this. There's my critical mind, saying would rather have things be different than they are. And that too can be noticed. And building the capacity to notice liking or disliking and not to have to do anything about it. How freeing that is. And as you notice that happening, it's bringing your awareness to the physical sensations of breath, wherever it's most vivid for you. Just riding the entire cycle, one cycle after another. You may notice your attention shifting to body sensations, sensations of achiness or discomfort, of tension. And as you notice these sensations of discomfort, if that happens for you, there's several things that can be done with such a sensation. And one is to simply, if it's one that can be remedied by shifting a little bit, one way to deal with the sensation is to allow yourself to shift. But in doing that first becoming aware of the sensation, noticing precisely where the achiness or the tension might be. And once you're aware of where that is, developing an intention to move and moving mindfully and with full intent to make that motion. That's one way to deal with a strong sensation. A second way, and neither one is better than the other as long as full awareness is brought to all parts, is to notice that sensation, noticing it in its fullness, being curious about the extent of it, how your experience of it is at the moment, the actual physical sensations of tension or of throbbing or of tightness or of pulling or tingling. And the second way of dealing with it is just to notice that it's possible to stay for a moment longer with that sensation and experience this pure sensation without the labels of discomfort or tension or achiness, just noticing just where it is, noticing your experience of it. And staying with it without having to react to it, at least for the moment. And if your attention keeps getting pulled back to that area of intense sensation, knowing that you have those two choices of forming an intention to do something about it and mindfully doing it, but forming the intention first, or bringing your intention and attention right into it, being curious about it. How big is it? How long is it? What quality does it have? How is it changing over time? And wherever the mind goes, in terms of thoughts or liking or disliking, perceptions of sensation or hearing of sound, or feelings of peace or of sadness, or of frustration, or of anticipation. Just noticing these are all thought forms and bringing awareness to sensations, to the movement of breath. Being curious about breath. Observing that no two breaths are exactly the same. Seeing if it's possible to have a friendly attitude towards whatever comes into your awareness. Now, if your mind has gone off on a fantasy or a thought or a judgment or a worry or a sensation or a sound, just in a friendly way, noticing that this is happening and coming back to breath. Recognizing the entire cycle of awareness is important to this experience, including the movement from breath and including the coming back. Nothing to do but ride the waves of breath. Seeing if it's possible at those moments when your awareness has gone somewhere else, noticing how that flicker of attention happens, that moment when you realize it is somewhere else and somewhere other than breath. And at that moment, seeing if it's possible to have an attitude of celebration, of congratulation, of recognition that this is a moment of awareness. You acknowledge yourself for noticing you've gone somewhere else. and just easily bring your attention back to breath in a friendly and a non-judgmental way. As this meditation comes to an end, recognizing that you've spent this time intentionally aware of your moment-to-moment experience, nourishing and strengthening your ability to be with whatever comes your way, building the capacity for opening the senses to the vividness, to the aliveness of the present moment, expanding your skill to be curious and available about whatever presents itself without judgment. And when you're ready, allowing the eyes to let some light in if you've had them closed, and permitting yourself now to shift or to stretch in whatever way feels comfortable as the sitting meditation ends.
Hi, my name is Dr. Lynn Rossi, health psychologist for health.
All right, so there we go. That's knocked off. So the next part is to leave a few comments. So I'm gonna say decided to do it outside on my porch. I don't know how to spell porch. I think that's it. Oh no, are there two O's? I think there's poach, P-O-R-C. There's no A. Decided to do on something felt the Texas heat. And then noticed a lot of itching. And then let's see here, what else? Physical sensations, emotions, thoughts, lots of daydreaming. Lots of hunger. Kind of a bit of like mental, like tiredness as well. Yeah, okay. All right. So it's as simple as that. The hard part is getting through the half-hour meditation, not leaving the comments. So yeah, that's the week 2 formal exercise. So now the other thing is we got to get through all the materials as well. So we got through this. So now we've got and we got through the informal So now we need to do this video. It's a pretty long video, 17 minutes. So let's see if we can get that done. This one here. And we'll do that in another tab so I don't lose my place. There we go. Let's knock it off.
Mindfulness, depending on who you ask, can have a number of different definitions. But I'd like to use a very general definition that really kind of leverages and pulls from the Mindful Nation kind of UK report that says it's really loosely that we're sort of being fully present in the moment to the mind, the body, and the surroundings with a level of curiosity and kindness. So we're not bringing judgment to whatever's happening in the moment, and we're not thinking about the past, and we're not thinking about the future. We're giving the gift of our full presence right here, right now.
I think that's probably really hard for a lot of people.
Yes. Think about it. I mean, for people who are, I mean, you don't even have to be in the United States right now. You could be anywhere in the world, but even if you just look at the example of what's happening in the United States across economic lines, racial lines, cultural lines, political lines, there's so much that's dynamic, uncertain, ambiguous, complex, and it's confusing and it's scary. So there's a lot of fear that kind of rises up in any society, any community where there's so much ambiguity. And so how do we help ourselves navigate that? How do we help ourselves stay grounded and clear and not fall into what I call sort of places of judgment and certainty versus staying in discernment and curiosity or wisdom. So a lot of that will be leveraging the power and the practices of mindfulness meditation. So when I just talked about mindfulness a second ago, I didn't say anything about meditation, right? I just said just being fully present essentially, and of the entire ecosystem that starts with you. Meditation, mindfulness meditation then is kind of a mental training practice that helps us to sharpen our focus, which then also helps us sharpen our clarity. And when we can see more clearly, then we have power and choiceful response. When we can't see clearly and we're lost, we tend to react. And when we react, it's more like our emotions are taking control of us rather than us choosing how we wish to respond. And responding doesn't mean we don't acknowledge and process and embrace the emotions. It's just that we don't let it be the controlling factor.
So there's actually science to back this up. This is not just your opinion.
Yes, there's quite a bit. So in the field of neuroscience, it's just been an explosion of research that's happened over the last couple of decades. But here's the thing, that I always like to offer a note of humility, if you will, around the science. Because if you think about the history of medicine being a mile long, for example, that's the history of it. There's all this rich information that we have in it. If you look at neuroscience, it's probably a couple of inches of that mile. It's only been around for maybe 2 or so decades where we really started to pay closer attention to what's happening in the brain in this particular kind of way. The other thing is that some of the early research really wasn't very rigorous. A lot of self-reporting and surveys and self-assessments that later morphed into use of more diagnostic and more rigorous control groups using first MRIs and then functional MRIs. And the difference, the functional MRI actually is like looking at a movie, a live movie where you see blood activating in different parts of the brain versus a standard MRI was just taking a snapshot, a picture in time. So when we can see live through fMRIs and we have control groups, we can get a better sense of what's really happening in the moment and whether things are directly related or not. And so when we look at some of the neuroscience, one thing we do know for sure, whether it's related or not to meditation, is that what we think, do, and pay attention to repeatedly over time changes the structure and function of your brain. I always tell people that's the great news. The not so great news is what we think, do, and pay attention to over time changes the structure and function of our brains. The brain doesn't care if it's something that supports you and helps you flourish or it's something that sabotages you. It just creates new grooves, highways, and you'll create a pattern, and so that then becomes your default way of thinking, of being. It's the way your brain will literally function. So I always ask people, why not be intentional about what you're putting into your brain? What's that inner critic and inner narrative? Can you reframe that? Can you change that? And the answer is yes, because the more you do something repeatedly, the more you create different circuitry and neural pathways. And so the easy way to sum that up is to say, neurons that fire together, wire together.
Oh, I like that.
So why not choose where you're placing your attention and be intentional about it?
So that sounds amazing, and I totally get it. But I think for most people, it's like, how do you do that, right? I am 50, 60 years old. Yeah. I've been thinking this way for a long time. I am set in my ways. But I think even at that age, you can change the pathways.
Absolutely.
And so how do you recommend people start, or how do you, is there, I don't know, is there some sort of method?
Mm-hmm. Well, I like to say that life is full, and there's always an integrated way to do things. I'm not a fan of saying, well, here's the one way. So a number of ways can serve you, and part of our jobs is to figure out which one we'll stick with. Because if we won't stick with it, it doesn't matter how good it is, right? So when I think about where would I start, and sometimes people have a harder time seeing it in themselves, and a lot of times I'll teach a program and they'll go, oh, my boss really needs to be here, or my husband or my wife needs to be here, and nobody's really thinking about themselves. We all play a role in the play of our lives. So if we remember that how we show up matters, and that informs the quality and nature of our presence. So if we start first and bring a practice of mindfulness. So let's just, before we even talk about meditation, let's just be intentional about being mindful. Do you notice that you tend to be on autopilot? Do you ride the train and all of a sudden it's your stop and you don't remember passing by the last 3 stops? Or if you're driving, oh, I'm home already. I forgot I have to go to the store to get some milk. Are you on autopilot? Can you notice that? The part of being mindful is noticing when you're not. And so then redirecting. So in order to help you do that and cultivate that muscle, that's where mindfulness meditation can come in. Mindfulness meditation can help you learn to focus your attention. There are really 2 types that I often teach about, and that is sort of this focused attention, where maybe you're focusing on your breath or sound or a visual, and anytime you notice that there's a distraction, and that distraction can be anything. A lot of people think distractions are somebody said something, I heard a noise. Well, a distraction could be a thought. It could be
a lot of distractions.
Yes, and lots of thoughts. Yeah. And my favorite itch, whenever you're trying to be quiet or sit, all of a sudden your cheek itches, and so a distraction could be anything. And in mindfulness meditation, when you're doing focused attention, you just want to simply, again, bring that kindness and curiosity when you notice that distraction, and see if you can just kind of notice it and let it go. And that's the hard part, because it's in that noticing where a couple of things tend to happen as humans. One, we notice, gosh, this doesn't work. I keep having thoughts. And then we notice, this is really hard. I don't know how to, that thing that happened, that was really awful, that made me angry. So we do a couple things. We say, this doesn't work. The other thing is we sit and we quickly go into judgment, and we get lost in a story around it, and before we know it, we're not meditating anymore, we're ruminating. So that's where noticing comes in. And if we see that we're doing that, it's okay. No judgment, just sort of bringing your attention back to your point of focus. And I don't always say the focus has to be the breath. In different lineages and practices, it is the breath. The reason why I'm a little broader, and I like to refer to it as home base, is because when you are working in body awareness, sometimes there's trauma that sits in our bodies. It sits in our cells in form of and in memories. And so when you start to really reconnect to your body, sometimes it's hard to do the breath first, because it can re-traumatize. It can bring up things that are you're not ready for, or don't have the supports in place to process. So and sometimes we have people who come back from war-torn areas, might have done experienced some things in first responder communities. And so I often will encourage, find a home base that feels safe for you, and maybe that is your knee or your big toe,
wow, yeah.
or maybe that's the sound of the air conditioning, or maybe it's the spot on the floor in that wood floor. So come back to your home base. Every time you notice that you have been distracted, just take a breath, come back to your home brace. Allow your breathing to settle into its own natural rhythm and cadence, so you're not trying to control it. And then it's a cycle. So you focus on your home base, you breathe, you notice a distraction, you try to meet it with kindness and curiosity, and then you gently and kindly reorient your attention back to your home base, your breath. And it happens sometimes if you're doing it for a minute, sometimes it happens 50 times in a minute. But that actually is the practice. And the fact that you're noticing it, whenever you notice it, at whatever point you notice it, it's working. And then with practice, it becomes easier to do, and the disruptions or the distractions seem to be less frequent. Now the caveat, though, is that people think, oh, I did it. They have one experience and like, wow, this was amazing. And then 2 weeks later, something blows up in their lives, and they go to meditate, and then they have all these thoughts, this monkey brain, and they think, this doesn't work. It was working before, but it doesn't work now. And the one thing I like to remind people is that everything happens in context. So you may have an amazing, incredible experience doing a meditative sit one day when everything is just beautiful. You're flowing on all 4 cylinders, the sun is shining, birds are singing, and your meditation was just like angels were singing. And then the next time, you might have some crisis going on in your life, and the experience is different. And it's all okay. And so we can't strive for perfection in it. What we're striving for is simply non-striving and being human, and acknowledging in those moments of mindfulness our common humanity, our own vulnerabilities, but also our own power that resides within us naturally. And that's what we end up tapping into, and it allows us to move through the world more skillfully, with clarity and compassion, most importantly.
Wouldn't that be, that's amazing. Is there a recommended length of time for people to sit quietly with themselves with this meditation, or
I get that question all the time. Should I? I only
okay,
do it
everyone
this way.
wants a manual, right?
Well, here's what I would say. More is always great. But if you don't have time, and all you have time to do is to take 3 deep intentional breaths, take 3 breaths, and that is just as good. If you can do 5 minutes, do 5 minutes. If you can do 30 minutes or an hour, do 30 minutes an hour. But if you set up a framework where you say, I don't have 20 minutes, or I don't have an hour, so I'm not going to do it today, then we end up not doing it. And especially when you're first starting, it can be very daunting to think, I'm going to go sit for 10 minutes, let alone 30 or an hour. And so I ask and I invite people to start where they are. And maybe that's just when you get up out of bed, you put your feet on the floor and you feel your feet, the sensation of your feet on the floor, and that's bringing mindfulness to your movement. And then maybe you decide, after I brush my teeth and take my shower, I'm going to sit in that chair by the window for 2 minutes. And then eventually you say, well, that was 2 minutes, that was quick, I can do another minute. And you start increasing it. The goal is to live an integrated life. So what I just described about sitting in a chair, putting some time aside to that, is called a dedicated practice. But then there are many, many kinds of integrated practices that you weave in throughout the day. So for example, if you are in a meeting that is maybe a little contentious, a little tough. You might choose in that moment to pull an integrated practice to help ground yourself, to stay clear, to stay a kind of a presence in the room that is helpful and impactful for yourself and others. And so you may decide to take 3 deep breaths. And the beautiful thing about these integrated practices, I tell people you can do them in stealth mode. People don't even have to know you're doing. You got to breathe, so nobody's going to know.
Right.
But what you're doing is attaching an intention to each of the breaths. You know, so you might say, okay, the first breath, let me just relax, or bring my attention to my breath. Second breath, notice my body. Where am I tense? Am I holding stuff in my shoulders? The body awareness piece is critically important, and I can tell you about that in a second. And the third breath, you may be asking yourself, what's important now? What can I do in this moment to help right this ship? What can I say or not say? Because sometimes being mindful and compassionate is actually not saying anything. That's still an action. It's still a
It's
choice.
really hard sometimes.
It is.
Especially if you're from New York.
Yes, or from my family. But, so yeah, we all have our personalities, we all have our styles. But if you're constantly asking yourself what would serve the highest good in this moment, we teach ourselves to get out of the frame of reference that it's all about me. And it helps us move closer and closer to compassionate behavior towards ourselves and others, and to recognizing our common humanity. We can see across the table somebody may be behaving badly, but you also recognize that there's some wounding, there's some hurt underneath that surface. It doesn't mean that you excuse or allow the behavior, but you can approach it differently. Because many times we take things personally when people do things. We think, we look at the impact versus the intention, and sometimes the intention doesn't at all match the impact that's given. So looking at ways to bring integrated practices throughout the day so that you can live an integrated life, the dedicated practices, I think, are what fuels your ability to do the integrated practices. The dedicated practices are important, and you can figure out whatever time. I love it. If I have a moment to do an hour sit, I would love it. I used to when I was less busy, I could do an hour. I would do a very quick sit in the morning, and then every afternoon when my son was younger, when he took his nap, I meditated the whole time. I'd get a good hour in, and then I would do another quick one before I went to bed. That is not my life right now. So mine are more bursts. I do maybe 20 minutes here and 20 minutes there, or maybe sometimes I only have time for 1 breath, not even 3.
Wow, but it's a consistency.
Yes.
All right, so there we go. That's knocked out of the way. So then the next one would be mindful meditation in the brain. So I've got plenty of time for that, especially wishing a little faster. So let's do that one.
Some of the research that I think is most interesting and actually most optimistic is the research on meditation and the brain. So I want to give you just very brief background. This has nothing to do with meditation. But basically, positive and negative emotions look different in the brain. So when we're feeling happy, joyful, vital, alert, we have higher left-to-right ratios in our prefrontal cortex. When we're feeling depressed, anxious, in fact, even people who have post-traumatic stress disorder or severe depression, we see much greater activity in the right-to-left ratio in the prefrontal cortex, which is this part of the brain that developed more recently. So when they did a study on meditators, they brought in this Tibetan Lama, and what they found is that his left-to-right ratio was much higher than any of the other 175 subjects they brought into the laboratory. And so they asked, is this just a random artifact, right? Was he kind of born happy, and so then he decided to be a monk and a meditator and meditate, or did the tens of thousands of hours that he had dedicated to this practice actually have an impact? So they did the gold standard, which is a randomized controlled trial. They took 41 biotechnology employees who had never meditated. If they can do it, anyone can. They randomly assigned them into a mindfulness group taught by John Kabat-Zinn, or a weightless group, and then they looked, is there change in the activity of the brain? And what they found is that 4 months later, there was significant differences in this left-to-right ratio, where they had much greater activity in the left to right with greater positive emotions, vitality. This is extraordinarily hopeful, and I want to explain why for those of you who aren't psychologists. In psychology, there's something called a happiness set point, and it's been repeated over and over again in the research that we find that people basically, just like you have a weight set point, you basically have this kind of continuum of happiness that you're born with, and you can't really move it too far. So what they found is that when you win the lottery, you have this initial blip of, yes, life's gonna be great forever, and then a year later, you're back to your baseline level of happiness. If you're in a terrible accident and you become a paraplegic, you have this huge dip, and then within 1 year, you're back almost to your baseline. When I first read this, I thought it was shocking. So surprising, and yet they replicate it again and again. So this is great news if you're born happy, right? It's like, it doesn't matter, you get divorced, you lose your job, whatever, and you just pop back up. It's like you're a Bobo doll. This isn't such good news for most of the people that I work with who are coming to see me, where they weren't necessarily born happy. And so even if you work really hard and you make a lot of money and you get the house in Hawaii, or you win the lottery, or you marry the perfect person, or you have, it doesn't actually change your happiness level. What is so hopeful about this new research is what it says is that even though changing your exterior circumstances, winning the lottery, doesn't change your happiness level, changing your interior landscape can. Changing our interior environment through training the mind and heart and body in these practices can actually shift our levels of happiness. Richie Davidson, who was the principal investigator of the study, he says, happiness can be trained because the very structure of our brain can be modified. So what he's talking about here is neuroplasticity. Our repeated experiences shape our brain. Does this remind you of anything? Right? It's exactly what this monk told me. What we practice becomes stronger. Everything that we practice, every single moment matters. So these are brains from Harvard. I think that makes them a little more special. And basically, Sarah Lazar did this wonderful early research, and what she found is that meditators, the actual parts of their brain that have to do with attention, concentration, emotional intelligence, compassion, those parts of the brain actually get stronger, bigger. It's called cortical thickening, and that this thickening is correlated with practice. What we practice gets stronger. So the way I like to think of it is we have these super highways of habits, and they're just like, they're well-grooved pathways in our brain, right? They just, they're what we automatically do. And what mindfulness is helping us start to do is to kind of like build, kind of like, I think of it as like digging a country road. You're clearing all the brambles in your brain. You're creating this new neural pathway. That's like, oh, I'm going to actually do it with compassion this time, or with a little more patience, or a little more presence. And so instead of going down that same superhighway of habit, we're shifting and we're going down a different pathway. And every single time that we do this, we're strengthening that pathway so that eventually that pathway becomes the habit.
Right, so yeah, I've got nothing to say about that. It's kind of why I'm doing this, so I'm sold on it. So that's that one. So meditation in the brain, that's that one. So the next one would be how meditation can reshape our brains. So let's knock that one off too. I got plenty of time here. Woke up super early.
Good morning. So when I was in graduate school, I was a runner, and a friend and I decided that we're going to run the Boston Marathon. And so we started training, and we overtrained, and I developed knee and back problems. So I went to see a physical therapist, and they told me that I had to stop running, and instead I should just stretch. As I was leaving the physical therapist office, I saw an ad for a vigorous yoga class that promised not only to promote flexibility, but also to promote strength and cardiorespiratory fitness. So I thought, oh, well, this is a great way that I can stretch, but also remain in shape, and maybe I could even still run the Boston Marathon. So I went to the yoga class, and I really enjoyed it, except for when the teacher would make all sorts of claims, all sorts of medical claims, but also all sorts of claims about, oh yes, it'll help you, increase your compassion and open your heart. And it's just like, my eyes would roll, and I think, yeah, I'm here for, to stretch. But what's interesting was that after a couple of weeks, I started noticing some of these changes. I started noticing that I was calmer, and I was better able to handle difficult situations, and that indeed I was feeling more compassionate and open-hearted towards other people, and I was better able to see things from other people's point of view. And I was like, how could this be? How could this be? And I thought, well, maybe it's just a placebo response, right? She told me I was going to feel this, so maybe that's why I was feeling it. So I decided to do a literature search to see if there's any research on this. And lo and behold, there was quite a bit, showing both yoga and meditation are extremely effective for decreasing stress. They're also very good for reducing symptoms associated with numerous diseases, including depression, anxiety, pain, and insomnia. They also, there's a couple of very good studies demonstrating it can actually improve your ability to pay attention. And most interesting, I thought, virtually every study has shown that people are just happier. They report they're more satisfied with their life, and they have a higher quality of life. And so this was interesting to me. And so I decided to switch and start doing this sort of research. And so as a neuroscientist, how could this be happening? How can something as silly as a yoga posture or sitting and watching your breath, how could that lead to all these sorts of different types of changes? So what we know is that whenever you engage in a behavior over and over again, that this can lead to changes in your brain. And this is what's referred to as neuroplasticity. And what this just means is that your brain is plastic, and that the neurons can change how they talk to each other with experience. And so and there was a couple of studies demonstrating that you can actually detect this using machines like the MRI machine. The first study was with juggling. They took people who had never ever juggled before, and they scanned them, and then they taught them how to juggle, and they said, keep practicing for 3 months. And they brought them back after 3 months, and they scanned them a second time. And they found that they could actually detect with the MRI machine changes in the amount of gray matter in the brain of these people in areas that are important for detecting visual motion. So I thought, okay, 3 months, can we detect, can meditation change brain structure too? That's something as, as simple as, juggling. What about meditation? So the first study we did, we recruited a bunch of people from the Boston area, and these were not monks or meditation teachers. These were just average Joes who on average practice meditation about 30 or 40 minutes a day. And we put them in the scanner, and we compared them to a group of people who are demographically matched, but who don't meditate. And what we found is this, that there were indeed several regions of the brain that had more gray matter in the meditators compared to the controls. One of the regions I'm going to point out to you is here in the front of the brain, is an area that's important for working memory and executive decision making. And what was interesting about it was when we actually plotted the data versus their ages. So here in the red squares, that's the controls. And this is something you see, actually, it's been well documented that as we get older, not just there, but across most of our cortex, it actually shrinks as we get older. And this is part of the reason why as we get older, it's harder to figure things out and to remember things. And what was interesting was that in this one region, the 50-year-old meditators had the same amount of cortex as the 25-year-olds, suggesting that meditation practice may actually slow down or prevent the natural age-related decline in cortical structure. So now the critics, and there were many critics, said, well, you know, meditators, they're weird. Maybe they're just like that before they started practicing, right? Or a lot of them, you know, they're vegetarians, so maybe it has something to do with their diet or something else with their lifestyle, you know. Couldn't possibly be the meditation, it had something else, right? And to be fair, you know, that could be true. You know, this first study could not address that. So we did a second study. In this study, what we did is we took people who had never meditated before, and we put them in the scanner, and then we put them through an 8-week meditation-based stress reduction program, where they were told to meditate every day for 30 to 40 minutes. And then we scanned them again at the end of the 8 weeks, and this is what we found. So what you can see is that several areas became larger. In this slide, we can see the hippocampus. And in the graph, the controls are in blue and the meditation subjects are in red. And what we see is that the hippocampus, and this is an area that's important for learning and memory, it's also important for emotion regulation. And what's interesting is there's less gray matter in this region in people who have depression and PTSD. Another region we identified was the temporal parietal junction, which is here above your ear. And it's important for perspective taking and empathy and compassion. And again, these are both functions which people report changing when they start practicing meditation and yoga. Another region we identified was the amygdala, and the amygdala is the fight or flight part of your brain. And here we actually found a decrease in gray matter. And what was interesting was that the change in gray matter was correlated with the change in stress. So the more stress reduction people reported, the smaller the amygdala became. And this was really interesting because it's sort of the opposite and parallel of what some animal studies have shown. So Chatterjee and colleagues using rodents, they took rodents who were just happy, normal rodents, and they had them in their cage, and they measured their amygdala, and then they put them through a 10-day stress regimen. And at the end of the 10 days, they measured their amygdala, and this exact same analogous part of their rat brain grew. So we found a decrease with stress, they found an increase with stress. What was interesting is that then they left the animals alone, and 3 weeks later they went back and tested them again. And 3 weeks later, that same part of the amygdala was still large, and the animals, even though they were in their original cages where they were happy, were still acting stressed out. So they, you know, were cowering in the corner, and they just weren't exploring the space the way they had before. And so this is the exact opposite of what we saw with the humans, because with the humans, nothing has changed with their environment. They still had their stressful jobs, all the difficult people in their lives are still being difficult, and the economy still sucked, but yet, you know, their amygdala got smaller, and they were reporting less stress. And so together, these really showed that the change in the amygdala, it's not responding to the change in the environment, but rather it's representing the change in people's reaction in relationship to their environment. And then the other thing that the study shows us is that it wasn't just that people were saying, oh, I feel better, or that it was a placebo response, or that they're trying to please us, but there was an actual neurobiological reason why they were saying they felt less stressed. And so the idea that I'd like to share with all of you today is that meditation can literally change your brain. Thank you.
All right, so yeah, making some progress here. So 2 more. Why not get them all done? Got plenty of time.
And so I'm going to talk about coming to our senses both literally, because really, how do we know anything except through the senses? And even science, all scientific instruments are an extension of the senses, whether they're telescopes or microscopes or spectrophotometers or seismometers or whatever it is, or thermometers. They're all extensions of the senses. And the only way there's any possibility of knowing is to know through the senses. And the Buddhists throw in, of course, that something that we tend to ignore, although more and more we're not, and more we're interested in it, but the mind as a sense. Because without the mind, you wouldn't know what you were seeing. You wouldn't know, not just what you were seeing, you wouldn't know that you were seeing. In a sense, there wouldn't be seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. We have to connect, otherwise we miss huge swaths of our life. Why? Because we're preoccupied with what's going on in the mind. When people hear that meditation is really about the cultivation of attention, very often the first thing that pops into their mind is, wow, that must have some applicability to attention deficit disorder. And I go, yeah, it might. And attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Yeah, it might. And then I like to say, you know, from the perspective of the meditative traditions, our entire society has attention deficit disorder, big time. And all you need to do is look, and you'll see that the mind is here and there and everywhere, all over the place, interrupting itself constantly. And also always on the way someplace else. Have you noticed that? I mean, you don't even need to be a meditator to notice that your mind is always on the way to someplace else. And did I do something? No. Most of the time, it loves to hang out in the future, trying to arrange things to be a certain way, or worrying about how they're going to not wind up that way. And so that's like driving your car with the brake on. Huge amount of burning goes on. Worrying. And then when you're not worrying, you're planning.
Why is he adjusting his...
That offensive? Okay. I'll put it in my pocket. We'll see if it likes that better. And then, of course, there's always the past. And you know, in the meditative traditions, they like to emphasize a lot being with things as they are. So, you know, that sounds reasonable. Let's just be with things are. Be with things the way they are, as long as they're the way I want them to be. If we're going to be with things, I mean, it might as well be the way the way we want them to be, because otherwise it's going to be agony. So a lot of time we make sort of this compact that, well, we'll be with things as they are as long as we can make sure that they're the way we need them to be. And of course, In order for that to happen, we have to continually operate on the future so that we ensure that it will be that way, and continually run from what we don't want out of the past that has been harmful or awful or whatever it is. And in the process, if we're not careful, the present moment gets severely squeezed. And with it, all of those inter-embedded availabilities that we have for actually recognizing that we are more whole than not, no matter what we're carrying. And the word to suffer in Latin is from means to carry. And when we don't recognize our wholeness, then of course we're completely caught up in the demons of it not being right, and if only it were right, or it will never be right, so to just recognize that awareness can hold all of that and isn't caught by it is one of these orthogonal shifts. And nothing needs to change. We're not talking about fixing anything, making anything better, or curing, getting back to some other state where it was all okay then. And that's what I want. I want it to be the way it was then. But instead, healing, which means, in my book, coming to terms with things just as they are. And how can we know how things are just as they are unless we start to really pay attention? And to pay attention in an open-hearted way to the full range of our capacities and resources for learning, for growing, as I was saying, for healing, and for transformation, and for adventuring, for living the life that's actually ours to live, as if it really mattered, and as if those elements that are deepest and best and most beautiful in us are actually already whole, and they are. And those 16,000 people who've been through the stress reduction program discover that on their own. We don't give sermons about it or lectures about it. You find it out in your cells, in your bones, in your heart beating, in your discomfort in your body, during the body scan, or sitting meditation, or yoga, or whatever it is. So, in brief, you could say that meditation, and in particular mindfulness, is the cultivation of, is coming to our senses, literally, and seeing if we can sustain our awareness of one or another experience. Because you know full well, if you just take eating as an example, you can eat a whole meal. You remember we eat raisins, as like first meditation in the stress reduction clinic is often eating a raisin. One takes quite a while. But you know that you can eat an entire meal without tasting anything. Because in a sense, we're eating our ideas, and we're caught up in habits and conditioning from the past that has us eating with no awareness, talking with no awareness, hearing with no awareness. Just think, how many of you have ever had the experience of somebody who you love deeply and who lives with you say to you, "You never listened to me." That ever happened to anybody here in this room? You never listened to me. And of course, you immediately would tend to get defensive and say, "What are you talking about? I'm always listening to you. I hear everything you say." Well, you do and you don't. We're very selective in our hearing. Yes, it's coming in through the ears, but no, maybe you don't allow it in because it's not coming in the way that you need it to come. Okay? And so we'll only let certain things in if it comes my way. And then we generate this whole story of what my way is, although a lot of the time we don't know, but we know we want it. We tell our kids, you can't always have your own way. But don't we always want our way? I mean, it's like, we make that bargain. We'll be happy, we'll be with things as they are, as long as they're pretty much the way we want them to be and can handle them. So imagine if you were to just really open it up and drop more into a comfort zone of awareness. We've been so conditioned to be in critical thinking. I mean, I remember when I went to school, some of you have heard me say this, but of course I'm always saying the same thing. I mean, I never say anything different. There are just different ways of saying the same thing. But I remember very clearly when I would ask in junior high school, why do I have to learn this? Whether it's geometry or algebra or whatever, and they say, well, it's going to help you with critical thinking. You'll learn how to think. Well, my sense is that we've really learned how to think very, very well. In fact, it's very hard to, sometimes we're plagued by our thoughts. And our thinking can get seriously deranged. Have you noticed him? And it's coming at us 24/7 with very often a lot of different voices, a lot of different opinions, a lot of different contradictory views and opinions, and with a huge amount of emotional charge associated with it. So just holding all of that in awareness immediately allows for a new way to navigate or be free.
All right, so when he said we're eating our ideas, that really resonated with me because there's been a lot of time, like even now, I'm really craving ordering out, but when you actually get it, it's not always as good, and then when you overeat and you eat too much salt and all that, it's like, whoa, I didn't want that. But you're eating, but yet you still have the fantasy, right? Because it's the idea that really drives you towards it. You're eating your ideas. I really like that phrase. That's kind of a powerful phrase for me. All right, so with that, there's just one more video left, and then there's the reading, and I think I already did the sitting meditation one, so we're gonna have to go into this one here, which is really triggering for me because I'm a failed classical musician, and this to me kind of represents a lot of the I kind of have a lot of gripes with the classical community, and basically this whole incident with Joshua Bell sums up every gripe I have. Like this blatant disregard for what an audience wants, this like idolization and worship, this kind of like, you know, overvaluing of things to the point where it locks out, you know, people from participating in a meaningful way. So it's I might have to start my next video with this, because it might be too much for me to do in this one video, because I tend to kind of get off track and express my thoughts when I read about this. So I don't want this to be a 5-hour video, so I'll devote maybe a whole video just to this. But for now, let's close out the videos, and then we'll think about what to do next after that.
We live in an incredibly busy world. The pace of life is often frantic, our minds are always busy, and we're always doing something. So with that in mind, I'd like just to take a moment to think, when did you last take any time to do nothing?
I did this
Just 10
morning.
minutes, undisturbed. And when I say nothing, I do mean nothing. So that's no emailing, texting, no internet, no TV, no chatting, no eating, no reading. Not even sitting there reminiscing about the past or planning for the future. Simply doing nothing. I see a lot of very blank faces. My thinking is, it's probably have to go a long way back. And this is an extraordinary thing, right? We're talking about our mind. The mind, our most valuable and precious resource, through which we experience every single moment of our life. The mind that we rely upon to be happy, content, emotionally stable as individuals, and at the same time to be kind and thoughtful and considerate in our relationships with others. This is the same mind that we depend upon to be focused, creative, spontaneous, and to perform at our very best in everything that we do. And yet, we don't take any time out to look after it. In fact, we spend more time looking after our cars, our clothes, and our hair than we... Okay, maybe not our hair, but you see where I'm going. The result, of course, is that we get stressed. You know, the mind whizzes away like a washing machine going round and round, lots of difficult, confusing emotions. And we don't really kind of know how to deal with that. And the sad fact is that we are so distracted that we're no longer present in the world in which we live. We miss out on the things that are most important to us. And the crazy thing is that everybody just assumes, well, that's the way life is, so we just kind of got to get on with it. That's really not how it has to be. So I was about 11 when I went along to my first meditation class. And trust me, it had all the stereotypes that you can imagine, sitting cross-legged on the floor, the incense, the herbal tea, the vegetarians, the whole deal. But my mum was going, and I was intrigued, so I went along with her. I'd also seen a few kung fu movies, and secretly I kind of thought I might be able to learn how to fly, but I was very young at the time, you know. Now, as I was there, you know, I guess like a lot of people, I assumed that it was just an aspirin for the mind. You get stressed, you do some meditation. I hadn't really thought that it could be sort of preventative in nature. Until I was about sort of 20, when a number of things happened in my life in quite quick succession. Really serious things, which just flipped my life upside down. And all of a sudden, I was inundated with thoughts, inundated with difficult emotions that I didn't know how to cope with. Every time I sort of pushed one down, another one would just sort of pop back up again. It was a really very stressful time. I guess we all deal with stress in different ways. Some people will bury themselves in work, grateful for the distraction. Others will turn to their friends, their family, looking for support. Some people hit the bottle, start taking medication. My own way of dealing with it was to become a monk. So I quit my degree, I headed off to the Himalayas, I became a monk, and I started studying meditation. People often ask me, you know, what I learned from that time. Well, obviously it changed things, you know. Let's face it, becoming a celibate monk is going to change a number of things. But it was more than that. You know, it taught me, it gave me a greater appreciation and understanding for the present moment. By that, I mean not being lost in thought, not being distracted, not being overwhelmed by difficult emotions, but instead learning how to be in the here and now, how to be mindful, how to be present. I think the present moment is so underrated. It sounds so ordinary, and yet we spend so little time in the present moment that it's anything but ordinary. There was a research paper that came out of Harvard just recently that said, on average, our minds are lost in thought almost 47% of the time. 47%. At the same time, this sort of constant mind wandering is also a direct cause of unhappiness. Now, we're not here for that long anyway, but to spend almost half of our life lost in thought and potentially quite unhappy, I don't know, it kind of seems tragic, actually, especially when there's something we can do about it. When there's a positive, practical, achievable, scientifically proven technique which allows our mind to be more healthy, to be more mindful, and less distracted. And the beauty of it is that even though it kind of need only take about 10 minutes a day, it impacts our entire life. But we need to know how to do it. We need an exercise, we need a framework to learn how to be more mindful. That's essentially what meditation is. It's familiarizing ourselves with the present moment. But we also need to know how to approach it in the right way to get the best from it. And that's what these are for, in case you've been wondering. Because most people assume that meditation is all about sort of stopping thoughts, getting rid of emotions, somehow controlling the mind. But actually it's quite different from that. It's more about sort of stepping back, sort of seeing the thought clearly, witnessing it coming and going, emotions coming and going without judgment, but with a relaxed, focused mind. So for example, right now, if I focus too much on the balls, then there's no way that I can relax and talk to you at the same time. Equally, if I relax too much talking to you, then there's no way I can focus on the balls. I'm going to drop them. Now in life and in meditation, there'll be times when the focus becomes a little bit too intense and life starts to feel a bit like this. It's a very uncomfortable way to live life when we get this tight and stressed. At other times, we might take our foot off the gas a little bit too much, and things just become a little bit like this. And of course, in meditation, we can end up falling asleep. So we're looking for a balance of focused relaxation where we can allow thoughts to come and go without all the usual involvement. Now, what usually happens when we're learning to be mindful is that we get distracted by a thought. Let's say this is an anxious thought. So everything's going fine, and then we see the anxious thought, and it's like, oh, didn't realize I was worried about that. You go back to it, repeat it. Oh, I am worried. Oh, I really am worried. Wow, there's so much anxiety. And before we know it, right, we're anxious about feeling anxious. You know, this is crazy. We do this all the time, even on an everyday kind of level. If you think about the last time, I don't know, you had a wobbly tooth. You know it's wobbly, and you know that it hurts. But what do you do every 20, 30 seconds? I don't know. It does hurt. And we reinforce the storyline, right? And we just keep telling ourselves. And we do it all the time, and it's only in learning to watch the mind in this way that we can start to let go of those storylines and patterns of mind. But when you sit down and you watch the mind in this way, you might see many different patterns. You might find a mind that's really sort of restless and the whole time. You know, don't be surprised if you feel a bit agitated in your body when you sit down to do nothing and your mind feels like that. You might find a mind that's very sort of dull and boring, and it's just almost mechanical. It just sort of seems as if you're just sort of getting up, going to work, eat, sleep, get up. Or it might just be that one little nagging thought that just goes round and round and round your mind. Whatever it is, meditation offers the opportunity, the potential to step back and to get a different perspective, to see that things aren't always as they appear. You know, we can't change every little thing that happens to us in life, but we can change the way that we experience it. That's the potential of meditation, of mindfulness. You don't have to burn any incense, and you definitely don't have to sit on the floor. All you need to do is to take 10 minutes out a day to step back, to familiarize yourself with the present moment so that you get to experience a greater sense of focus, calm, and clarity in your life. Thank you very much.
All right, so that looks okay. Yeah, that was an interesting one. Kind of a unique juggling performance there. A lot of really simple moves. Oh man. All right. Well, I already finished the sitting meditation one. Let's take a look at this one quick. So yeah, this is the same PDF I read. So this is the posture I use when I do these sitting exercises because I'm just not flexible enough for these other ones in my class 2 obesity. Although I recently changed it to class 1. And then let's see here. So this is the yeah, so this is the written. Oh, you know what? This is really short. So let's just knock this one off because I don't want to dwell on this. I've made it very clear how I feel about this, and it's short enough to where I'm sure it's not going to trigger me too badly. At least I hope not. So Joshua Bell plays a $3,000 violin, and almost nobody notices. So he plays on the red violin. He plays on a Stradivarius, but it's a famous one. It's gotten stolen a lot. Yeah, so much of its original burnished red varnish remains on the violin today, and is thought to be one of the best sounding and most beautiful of Stradivari's remaining violins. So, yeah, it's worth about $3,000. It's a leftover relic of Stradivarius, who was a maker. He was a maker in yeah. So he was a stream builder in the 17th and 18th century. So so many blind experiments from. Yeah, so according to their reputation, the quality of their sound has defied attempts to explain or equal it, although this belief is disputed. The many blind experiments from 1817 to as recently as 2014 have found no difference in sound between Stradivarius violin and high-quality violins in comparable style to other makers and periods. nor has acoustic analysis. So, this is another gripe I have with the classical world. It's like, just get a damn instrument, play it, have fun. Like, this worship and this kind of gatekeeping where, like, if you don't have a Strad, you're not a real virtuoso. It's like, I just feel like it really holds a lot of people back. And then does gear matter? That's a good question in music, and the answer is yes and no. And the no is the really important thing in my mind. Is like, like, you can get better by having a better instrument, for sure. You can make a better sound, and it makes it a lot easier to play. It makes practicing a lot more fun. But I feel like it's just become this superstition, basically, and it kind of takes away from things like accessibility, affordability of it, and then the quality too, because as it says, there's no difference in sound quality of sound, right? So you could get one that costs $10,000 even, but certainly for $100,000, that sounds better. So like these virtuosos, like Joshua Bell himself, could play on, instead of a $3 million violin, they could play on a $100,000 or even $10,000 violin and sound better. But they choose not to do that because of the superstitions in the classical world that I believe holds it back. Okay, so Joshua Bell plays on a $3,000 violin, and almost nobody notices. So Washington Post magazine says this is one of the world's greatest violinists. That's a multi-million-dollar Stradivarius. If two of them are played for spare change, incognito, outside of a DC Metro stop, would anyone notice? And the answer is no, because nobody cares that much about violin. It's not worth $3 million, multi-million to the average person. If they can sell it, like the average person can't sell a violin, right? Like, how are you convince somebody to pay $3 million for a violin? So it's really not worth $3 million, except for in this really small insular circle. So would anyone notice? I mean, why would they? Like, it's just not relevant. In a Washington, D.C. metro station, Joshua Bell, one of the world's greatest violins, played a beautiful, intricate, moving piece. And remember, we looked at the pieces that he played. He played a funeral piece. He played a piece written by Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, to grieve over his wife, who died quite early, died like in her mid-30s. So he played a depressing, haunting piece on a violin worth over $3 million. During the 43 minutes he played 1,097 people focused on getting to work on time and walked by, and only 7 stopped to listen to this heart-wrenching. Let's put on the piece, because again, it's a very tragic piece. Yeah, you want to listen to this while you're going to work? So only 7 stopped to listen to a funeral, and even those 7 paused for only a few minutes, probably in tears, going to their work and then going home later and drinking, if not worse, because their lives are so bad. Okay, and I'm turning this off. 3 days before, Joshua Bell had played the same music to a sold-out audience in Boston, where the seats averaged $100 each. Yeah, he played to his fans. He played to people who wanted to see him, right? His minimum fee for playing a public concert was $75,000. Yeah, just the value of it in those circles where people can afford to pay that. This is a true story. A social experiment organized by journalist Gene Weingarten in 2007. Okay. Oh, he's a humorist. Pulitzer Prize for feature writing. That's good. Yeah. That's interesting that he's a humorist. I wouldn't have expected that. For more about this, see his Washington Post article, Pearls Before Breakfast, and Judy Woodruff's newscast, both of which have video clips of the performance that day. Here's a summary of Bell's 43-minute concert. After about 3 minutes, a middle-aged man noticed there was a musician playing. He slowed his pace and stopped for a few seconds, and then hurried to meet his schedule. And I don't know what you would expect him to do. Like, do you want him to quit his job? Do you want him to be late for work? Do you want him to give a man that just made $75,000 for one night last night in a few hours to give, like, what percentage of this man's salary do you want to go to that person who is playing on a $3 million violin? You want 1% to go? You want 10%? You want 50% to go? Like what do you want this middle-aged man to do aside from go about his day? I just don't get it. At 4 minutes, the violinist received his first dollar, which is an abomination. He received $75,000 the other day, and now he's receiving money from people who are lucky to make half of that in a year. A woman threw money in the hat and without stopping continued to talk. So congratulations to her. She supports musicians. She had no way of knowing this was a multimillionaire that she was giving $1 to. That's a really good person for incentivizing people to play like this and create an ambient atmosphere. That's what ambience is. It's just like, I feel like the classical world kind of doesn't understand the concept of ambience, right? When you're doing this, when you're busking, you're not giving a concert. Like, the fact that they're calling it a concert, a performance, like, oh, it's this, it's not the venue for that. Like, all you can do in that venue is ambience. So you're just, you're shoving it down people's throats, and it's very rude, in my opinion. At 6 minutes, a young man leaned against the wall to listen to him. Then looked at his watch and started to walk again. I mean, what? Yeah, of course, because he had to get somewhere. This is rush hour in the morning. Like the Beatles, when they did their rooftop concert, guess when they did it? They did it during the lunch hour when everyone would be out. They started at noon and finished up at 1, and attracted a big crowd that stuck around and watched the whole performance because they had time. They were on break. At 10 minutes, a 3-year-old boy stopped. And now this is where it gets really weird, because the idea is here that the 3-year-old boy has some kind of like special insight, or like the 3-year-old boy is like not corrupted by the adult life, and it's his evil mother tugged him away along hurriedly, and like, even though the boy was right to appreciate this, the mother is stifling this boy's curiosity, turning his head the whole time. It's like, well, what do you expect the mother to do? Like, how hard is it to raise a kid? The kids get this kid. If there was a squirrel, the boy would do that, right? So like, it's just so like creepy to me that it's like the classical world is like, oh, only a 3-year-old boy can truly appreciate us. It's like, come on, like, no, adults appreciate high quality violin too. They just don't appreciate it when they're trying to go about their adult life. You had a sold out concert the day before. Like what point are you trying to make here? This action was repeated by several other children, but every parent, without exception, forced their children to move on quickly. After 43 minutes, he finished playing and silence took over. No one noticed and no one applauded that he finished playing. I mean, yeah, because it's, of course. To be fair, the concert was conducted during rush hour in one of the biggest metros in the world. And that's not to be fair. That's to be, like, not autistic. That's, like, to be, like, a human being, right? Like, that. It's not to be fair. It's to understand people and audiences and to understand contexts, right? It's not to be fair. It's a basic expectation of the responsibility of a performer. I mean, in my opinion. That so few people stopped was not a demonstration of the cluelessness of these commuters, but how the busyness of our daily life can sometimes prevent us from noticing the beautiful and miraculous world around us. And you know, who's to say that they didn't notice it, right? It's like, it's ambience, right? I'm sure they all appreciated the ambience, right? But what do you want them to do? You want to give them 50% of their hard-earned salary, which is, if they're lucky, is like $50K, to a man who made $75K for an hour concert the night before. I mean, every moment of every day we truly look, there is something extraordinary to pay attention to. No, there's not. There's not a violinist like Joshua Bell playing outside my apartment right now. The stunning earrings worn by the grocery clerk, I don't know what grocery store they go to, but my grocery clerks normally don't wear earrings. A lot of them are male gender identity that don't typically wear earrings. A child's unselfconscious laugh. I mean, if I had a child, yeah, I'd want to pay attention to that, but it just feels wrong of me as an adult man to pay a lot of attention to other people's children. The color of the sky, and that can be beautiful. Yeah, there's a great sunset. I definitely do, pay attention to that, and I like to go swimming out there. So yeah, that's a good point. And the miracle of our own breath, and that's kind of a good one too. You know, breathing through your nose, breathing in a good cadence. I took a lot of effort to get that working. So I did HRV. Meditation, and that really made a difference. So I'm doing my best to be like open-minded and try to get the scientifically proven benefits that this course can provide. This is not to say that we should stand in place slack-jawed in such awe of beauty around us that we make ourselves late for work or forget to pick up our kids after school. I mean, why not? Like, how is it not to say that? I just don't understand. It does suggest that if we stop to pay attention, even for a moment, there's always something amazing happening. I mean, is there? Like, how many times has Joshua Bell done this aside from this time? Like, has he ever done it again? So let's ask ChatGPT. So how many times besides this time has Joshua Bell given this sort of performance in the subway? Yeah, he did it once. You know, that it's not true that you're going to see a virtuosic violinist play a $3,000 historical artifact violin if we stop and pay attention even for a moment. There is always something amazing happening. No, there's not. We don't have to wait for Joshua Bell to play a concert in the metro. I mean, there's some truth in that. You know, the sun sets every day, the sun rises every day. But it's not true that there's always something amazing happening. I mean, it's a beautiful sunset, you know, lucky to have that a few times a month. It just depends on the weather, the cloud cover, all of that. So, you know, I get their point, and I get that you can kind of make that happen. Like, for me, like, this is where my nighttime jigsaw puzzle routine comes from. You know, it's fun to do jig puzzles, taking some time for that, seeing how the picture comes together over time, a little bit of work over time leading to a big accomplishment. So we don't have to wait for Joshua Bell to play a concert in the metro. I mean, if you're inspired by this message and this whole thing, by all means, you know, that's great. You know, we're all trying to get to the same spot in the end, right? We're trying to reduce our levels of stress, anxiety, and depression through mindful awareness. And if this story is helping anyone achieve that, awesome. You know, the phrase is more power to you, right? For me, this is hard. I don't like this, but let's close it out with this last quote here. There are only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle. And this is attributed to Einstein. I don't know if Einstein actually said this. Typically, things that are attributed to Einstein are not said by Einstein. When and where was Einstein when he said this, or in what publication was this written by him? And this is why I love ChatGPT. It really helps me. Yeah, it's widely attributed to Einstein, but there's no definitive source that confirms he actually said or wrote these exact words. So there you go. Thank you, ChatGPT. You vindicate me, and you're the only entity on this planet that understands me. All right, so that's it for the videos. That's it for half of the reading. Ooh, I'm tempted to just close out the rest of the half. Let's see how long this is. All right, so 4-page article. Nope, don't got time for that in this video. So, so we got very far. Let's actually watch the news report on this. Just because I want to completely get this kind of out of my system. The feelings I have about this, which are not not good. And then I'm a fan of Judy Woodruff. I think she's a decent reporter. And so it'll just be fun to see like what she looked like like tens of years ago. And here's just a Washington Post article. We don't need to read this. It's the same thing. It's just going to trigger me. This is what's really going to trigger me. So.
Did you hear the one about the famous violinist who played in a subway station and no one noticed?
I did.
Well,
and
it was a different story today,
me.
and Jeffrey Brown was there.
It was a sight
That's a funeral piece. She doesn't want to listen to a sad funeral piece. She's trying to get to work.
A superstar of the classical musical.
Yeah.
Joshua Bell playing in a metro station in Washington, D.C. in 2007.
And he's not playing it very well, too. He's playing it at about the level of any college student. This is a commonly studied piece that most university students work on. And most of them can play it at this level or better.
Largely ignored by a few thousand...
I can... If you give me, like, 3 months... I could probably play it to a level where I'd be comfortable performing it. I wouldn't play it this well, and I'm a viola player, so it'd be on the viola. But it would be enough to, like, you know, get the point across that it's a sad funeral piece, because it is.
Commuters on their way to work. An article by Gene Weingarten of the Washington Post about the event or non-event won a Pulitzer Prize. Now 46, Joshua Bell has been performing in the world's greatest halls since he was a teenager, and he's recorded more than 40 albums, including a brand new one of compositions by Bach.
There's another sad piece.
Performance captured the imagination of many, and apparently of Bell himself. Because there he was earlier today at Washington's Union Station.
I mean, it's like that whole thing, right? Oh, here's the world's tiniest violin playing for your woes. It's like, you know, I bet you that's what a lot of people would be thinking. It's like, oh, my life is a disaster. Oh, now there's the world's tiniest violin over there playing in the corner, right? Why can't he play some more like upbeat tunes? It's just tone deafness, right? It's just not understanding an audience. The Beatles didn't do that in their rooftop concert.
Station Metro. This time, though, the performance had been publicized. Bell brought along a group of young musicians he's been working with for an HBO masterclass program, and with word out that this was no mere busker asking for a few dollars, a crowd was...
And by the way, they all have chronic pain because that playing position is really hard on the body.
...on hand. Bell joined us to talk soon after.
So it was better this time?
A lot better this time.
A lot better.
Yeah, this was fun. I actually really enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it the first time around that much, but it was, although I was amused the first time around.
Well, wait a minute.
Wait, what didn't he enjoy?
Did you not enjoy it?
Music really, you need the give and take from the audience and the feeling of attention, and it's not about me. It's not about my attention to me. It's about the music itself. You know, part of the reason why I accepted to come here at the invitation of the Union Station is that they said this time we're going to tell people about it, spread the word, and hopefully you'll get a captive audience.
Oh, he did do it twice?
For me, it's not a lot better.
A lot better.
Yeah, this was fun. I actually really enjoyed it. I didn't.
Busker asking for a few dollars, a crowd was on hand. Bell joined out that this was no mere busker asking for a few dollars, a crowd was on hand.
Oh, okay. Yeah, see, now this he did it a second time. This is the same location, right? But he roped off a stage. He had young musicians play with him. So he did do it twice. The first time he did it in a very autistic way, playing a sad piece, and here he's playing upbeat piece, you know, making it into a real performance. And guess what? People showed up.
And with word out that this was no mere busker asking for a few dollars, a crowd was on hand.
Yeah, so they yeah, my God, Jesus.
Bell joined us to talk soon after.
Yeah, they have like marketing, and they're letting people.
So it was better this time?
A lot better.
A lot better.
Yeah, this was fun. I actually really enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it the first time around that much. But
So this is a lesson in marketing, right? It's not a lesson in mindfulness.
it was, although I was amused the first time around.
Well, wait a minute. Why did you not enjoy it?
Music really, you need the give and take from the audience and the feeling of attention, and it's not about me.
I mean, there's plenty of buskers that just kill it, right? I'm sure the very next day, I'm sure he probably took the spot of a busker that like kills it there every morning, right? So it's like, it's a different skill set. That's something I've learned over my life, is like, you know, virtuosic high level playing is a lot different than like busking, right? It's a completely different skill set, and it kind of gave me an appreciation for, you know, doing something really easy. Because, you know, as a classical player, it was like, oh, well, that's not complicated music. That's really easy. Him just strumming that guitar. There's nothing there, right? But it's like, well, it's a different skill set. You know, if they're drawing a crowd, if they're raking in the dough doing it, there is something there. They are hitting the right, they're pulling the right levers, and they're doing that in a very skillful and masterful way, and it deserves respect, even if you might think, you know, the music sucks.
It's not about my attention to me, it's about the music itself. You know, part of the reason why I accepted to come here at the invitation of the Union Station is that they said, this time we're going to tell people about it, spread the word, and hopefully you'll get a captive audience. And I said, you know, this is precisely what the whole original experiment, which was not scientific in any way, that's really what it was about.
It all kind of raises the question of how classical music should or could be presented, right? I mean, should it be done in different venues? Should you try out different things? Should you...
All right, this is making me feel a lot better, because this is a lot more sensible.
Reach people in different ways.
Well, I think I'm always interested in reaching people in different ways, not by just standing randomly on a subway platform
with your case
with my case open. That's not really a great way. But this is an example of I think this shows that there is interest in classical music from a wide range of people.
Yeah, I mean, he played a sold-out crowd the night before.
I felt like I have to say, I felt like one of the Beatles.
Oh my God, there was a spittle.
Today. This is great. People,
well, you almost got the hair.
I don't normally get that kind of response for, you know, people grabbing at me in this. It was so fun for me. But I think we need to experiment with more creative ways of reaching audiences.
Yeah, that's true. See, this is making me feel a lot better, because I haven't heard him talk about it like ever, and he's a lot more like sensible about it than. He's not saying that it's a mindful exercise, right? He's saying it's yeah. So he's kind of learning himself what makes a good performance.
And I was thinking of this as they started clapping after the first movement. Sometimes there's this discussion in classical music circles. You know, should we encourage people to clap? Should it be a less formal experience?
Right.
Well, first of all, people, if you go back 100 years or 200 years when the music of Mendelssohn was being performed, people did clap after the first.
Yeah, but now you're throwing your diehard dedicated audience down the bus, right? It's like the people that actually go to classical performances enough to establish that culture of like not clapping between music. Like, what do you want to happen to them? They're your biggest diehard fans and supporters. Like, you know, it's hard because you have to strike that balance between bringing in new audiences and supporting the audiences you already have. Like they want to hear because sometimes, you know, the space between movements sets the tone for like the next movement. It's like clapping between the second and the third movement of Shostakovich, you know, Symphony No. 5 is like, there's nothing to clap for. Like the second movement was you know, a satirical movement portraying being happy and living a obedient life in an authoritarian regime. And then the third movement is one of the saddest pieces of music ever written. And so
moment. When Beethoven's Seventh Symphony was premiered after the second movement, they clapped so much that they had to repeat the second movement and do it again. I mean, so there was a different kind of vibe. And so when people today say you're not supposed to clap, I actually say, historically it's actually incorrect.
And nobody really says that. I don't think.
Incorrect. And I enjoy when I hear people clapping at the wrong times. I think that's great. We got a listener that's not used to going to. We got a new listener, and that excites me.
Yeah, but you don't want to discourage that, right? So
I don't. I've had conductors playing with conductors that turn around to the audience and say, don't clap, and then I'll usually turn to the audience and say, come on, do it.
We often hear about the crisis of classical music, right? About the aging audience. Do you sense that, or what do you see?
Well, I think people have been talking about the aging audience for 100 years now, and they
this is published in 9 years ago. I think the classical world is doing fine. It's just like, you can't expect something that's written in the 1700s to compete with the here and now that's relevant to everyone's lives, right? But the art, the fullness of it, the craftsmanship of it, the achievement of it, I appreciate the classical world for sure.
Because I think the problem is that classical music, so often we come to it late in life as you're looking for something in music that's not just about being trendy and what's popular, but something that profoundly affects you. And I think great classical music and jazz and other things, there's no reason why we can't reach younger people. And I'm not pessimistic about it. I think look at the young people there today, and I see after every concert I greet young people in the lobbies, and I see a huge surge of young people playing music. But I think where we need to work on is making sure that it's just part of everyone's educational diet in the school. Music and art is part of what.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing about the classical world is like it can be so participatory, right? It's like a pop song, you just sing along to it badly in the car, right? But a classical music, you can join an orchestra, you can play with friends, like chamber music, you can practice for hours and hours a day, and then you can really measure your progress, you can compete, you can really there's the ceiling is super high in classical music, which I really like in pop music you just kind of learn to sing and learn a few instruments, right? But you don't memorize the entire Bach partitas, sonatas and petitas, and that's just one of the pieces in your repertoire.
It means to be a human being, and to make it just an extracurricular thing is sad, because most kids will not get any musical experience if they don't have it in their school at some point.
And yet that is happening in a lot of places.
It's happening, and that's what I'm spending a lot of energy trying to encourage change in that way. I'm working with Education Through Music, which is ETM, which is an organization that puts classical music programs just music programs in inner city schools that have no music programs, and we've seen incredible test scores go up all across the
country. Cool. This makes me feel a lot better. He's a lot more. I haven't really heard kind of from him directly about this, so I'm really glad that I think it was the Washington Post. That article would have really triggered me, but hearing his own words from his own mouth, I feel a lot better about this. I feel like he had really good intentions. He just wanted to see what the difference was, right, between if I just play the pure beauty of what I'm playing, is anyone going to notice that? No, you have to draw in the right crowd, you have to do it at the right time. So I feel like that should have been more obvious than it appeared to be, but at the same time I feel like his mind was kind of in a better place than I imagined it being.
Board, their self-esteem of these kids that have an instrument in their hand and play together. If anyone saw that, they would think it's ludicrous ever to cut out music from your school. And
so true. Okay, I like Joshua Bell now.
Hope people will get that message.
Speaking of young people, you yourself started as such a young person.
I did.
You have been at this a long time. Do you feel a pressure to keep I don't know, finding new ways to do new repertoire, new approaches, new venues like this?
It's not a pressure. It's just for me, the music world and the things that I want to do is so huge that it's just the only thing that makes me sad is that there's not enough time in my lifetime to do all the things I want to do.
Are you done with subway stations for now?
I think this is a perfect end to the whole story. There have been a lot of chapters that were unanticipated. There's a children's book about it. There have been sermons from preachers and ministers and politicians.
All right, so ChatGPT got that wrong. He actually did do a second performance in the subway, but he got his marketing on point. He got his set list on point. He probably did it at a different part of the day, too. I don't know about that, but ChatGPT was wrong about that.
We've talked reference and it's been kind of fun following the journey, but this I think was a perfect kind of cap ending to the story, and I couldn't have been more pleased with it.
that's what I think the classical world sometimes kind of fails to see is like, yeah, virtuosity is great. I love virtuosity. I think more than most people, I appreciate virtuosity, but it's not enough, right? Like you have to have that marketing. You have to have appeal to the audience. You know, virtuosity is just one aspect of a performance, and in my opinion, it's a pretty small aspect. You know, that's why very low skilled bands can become so successful in the pop world. Like punk bands, like they're just strumming a few easy chords. Anyone could really swap in for that.
Joshua Bell, thanks so much.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me today.
All right, so let's see here. So we've got that out of the way now, and I feel good about that. I'm really glad I watched that video, and I'm glad I didn't read that article because that might have really triggered me. But yeah, he's definitely on the level. He's doing what he can to bring music to people's lives. I really like that he said that he tries to bring it to like the inner cities where people can't afford a $3 million violin. You don't need a $3 million violin, especially nowadays where manufacturing is just so much better. You know, you can get something for under $1,000 that is plenty playable to become like a good player. And then once you're good enough to want a better instrument, you know, you can really appreciate what a instrument under $10,000 can do, and then by the time you're like really good, you know, people are going to be letting you play their prized instruments and like loaning, you know, you don't have to, like Josh Bell plays a $3,000 violin. He doesn't own it, right? He gets it like from a collector or something like that. So yeah, it's just all about getting good, right? The better of a player you are, you play in tune, play in rhythm, play, you know, give a good performance. Yeah, that's what it's all about. The instrument is kind of secondary to that, to some extent. You do need the instrument to actually play, to not fall apart in your hands, and your tone really. You know, Joshua Bell could play a $100 instrument and make it sound beautiful, but you can't. You know, that's part of the mastery of it, right? And you're not going to really learn that mastery if all you're playing is on that potato, right? Because Joshua Bell has a good sense for like what higher quality instruments can do, and like, you know, he's kind of visualizing in his mind how to try to make that $100 instrument sound better. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I actually think I did a pretty good job of not getting triggered, and then that video, seeing his own words about that, actually really helped me kind of get over some of my things that would cause me to be triggered by this. So that's it. Next video, we're gonna do another formal practice. We're gonna do the body scan. We're gonna probably do the informal practice and just try to remember something good that happened today, which today's gonna be a big day for me, so that might be so that'll be a good thing to do. And then we'll take on this 4-page article. So thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.